I stood gripping the rail, seawater dripping from my sleeve, my knees still shaking from the near fall. The wine glass lay shattered behind me, its golden contents pooling like a crime scene. She slipped, Celine said, wide-eyed, voice sweet with false concern. My daughter-in-law almost sent me overboard and smiled while doing it. And in that moment, I knew she wasn't after my son. She was after everything. We're about to begin, but if you'd like, share where you're joining from. It reminds me the story doesn't echo into silence. It lands somewhere real. Drop it in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe. The water shimmered like molten gold beneath the setting sun as Sea-Proof glided out past the last marina pylons. The hum of the twin diesel engines thrummed steady underfoot. Patricia Pat Monroe stood at the helm for a moment, her fingers resting lightly on the teak wheel. She inhaled deeply, salt, diesel, varnish, comforting scents that had steadied her since her Navy days. "Eric, go check the fenders. They're still dragging." Her son looked up from his phone, startled. "Right, yeah, got it." Celine stood barefoot near the stern, one hand on the rail, the other cradling a wine glass. She wore a white linen wrap dress that caught the breeze like a sail. The smile she gave Pat was as smooth as the Chardonnay in her glass. "This yacht," Celine said, gazing around, "must be worth a fortune now. Vintage charm, modern upgrades. I can't imagine selling something with this much character." Pat didn't respond. She moved toward the bow, kneeling near a fender line. Celine's voice drifted over the deck. "Do you ever think about the future, Pat? About who should, carry on your legacy?" Pat tugged the line taut, the nylon stiff from years of sun. "My estate's already taken care of." "Oh, I know, but life changes fast." "People change." Celine laughed softly. "Sometimes it makes sense to revisit old decisions." Pat stood, brushing off her jeans. "Sometimes," she said, "it makes sense to hold the course." The moment lingered, wind teasing the edges of silence. Then, as Pat turned toward the port side, something changed. A sudden shift in weight behind her, the snap of sandals on fiberglass. A hand, fast and hard, pressed against the middle of her back. Her body jolted forward. Her left hand shot out, catching the cold steel rail just as her foot slid. A splash echoed behind her, a sharp crack of glass hitting the water. The yacht rocked gently as Pat steadied herself, her knuckles white around the rail. "Mom!" Eric shouted, rushing from the cabin. Pat turned slowly. Celine was 2 steps back, one hand now over her mouth. "Oh my God, she slipped! I didn't even see. Are you okay?" A wine glass lay in shards near the stern, stem intact but bowl shattered. The remnants dripped wine across the deck like a blood trail. "I just lost my balance," Celine added quickly, laughing in that brittle, breathy way she used when cornered. "Must have startled you. I swear, I wasn't even close." Eric hovered beside Pat, wide-eyed. "You all right?" Pat straightened, brushing a damp strand of hair from her temple. Her eyes scanned the aft overhead. There it was, the black dome of the deck cam, nestled beneath the flybridge overhang. Small, unassuming, and possibly recording. She said nothing, but her gaze lingered, calculating, not on Celine, not on Eric, but on that little orb above them. The yacht's engines hummed on. The shoreline drifted by. "Everything's fine," Pat said at last. Her voice was calm, measured, but inside her a quiet gear had clicked into place. The door to Pat Monroe's condo whispered shut behind her as she stepped into the quiet. Floor-to-ceiling windows faced the marina, where Sea-Proof swayed gently in its slip, bathed in the last amber spill of twilight. She kicked off her deck shoes and crossed the hardwood floor in silence. The only sound the faint creak of her knees and the rhythmic tick of the barometer above the mantel. In the built-in bookshelf, behind a row of maritime memoirs and a mounted compass, she pulled out a faded navy blue binder. Its vinyl cover was sun-bleached and cracking at the spine. Patricia R. Monroe, Skipper's Log. A life in inches. Every page had seen salt air, storm spray, diesel fumes, and grief. This book had known her husband's last voyage, her son's first, and now she laid it on the kitchen counter. The pen clicked open with a snap. Date: August 14th. Time: 1832. Wind, light SE, 7 knots. Incident: attempted push. Subject: Celine Monroe. Her handwriting, still military precise after all these years, did not shake. She paused, then flipped back 10 pages, eyes scanning a log entry from 2 months ago. Mooring line nearly lost. Starboard cleat untied mid-watch. She hadn't thought much of it at the time. Another page: lisinopril bottle found in bathroom sink drain. Weeks earlier, life jacket not aboard for Celine. All others accounted for. 3 isolated missteps. Annoying, but explainable. But tonight had made it a pattern. She turned and walked to the filing cabinet by the hall, unlocked the bottom drawer, and pulled out a manila envelope marked Estate in block Sharpie. Inside were documents in layers: a copy of her current will, a revocable trust draft from 5 years back, the house deed, yacht title, insurance policies, and 3 beneficiary forms: 1 for the brokerage, 1 for the condo, and 1 for a modest offshore account she kept untouched. She slid everything across the counter and opened a fresh notepad. Vulnerabilities: co-signed fuel credit line, Eric; spare yacht keys, Eric; medical proxy, outdated, Celine listed; marina access codes, unchanged; bank accounts with dual alerts, Eric set up years ago. The last one made her stomach harden. Pat set the pen down and reached for her phone. Lionel Ramirez answered on the second ring, his voice rough with evening bourbon. "Monroe, it's Pat. I need you to do a full walkthrough of Seaproof. Start with the deck cameras. Check all railings, especially port side aft. Look for anything tampered with." He paused, sensing the shift in her tone. "You want a full diagnostic?" "Full," she said. "Documented." "You got it." She hung up and immediately tapped into her email. Her message to Dana Brooks, harbor master, was short and tight. Subject: urgent, marina camera footage. "Hi Dana. Please confirm retention timeline for dock cameras and access logs from today between 17 none and 19 hours. Thanks, P. Monroe." Her finger hovered a second before hitting send. The condo's quiet settled back around her, but now it felt thick, like the pause between thunder and its echo. Outside, the marina lights came on in staggered rows, each one reflecting in the black water like floating stars. Celine had stood on that deck and smiled, calculated, cold. Pat looked at the log again. This time, she added one last line at the bottom of the page. Note: first deliberate attempt. Not clumsy, not careless, deliberate. She closed the binder and stood motionless in her kitchen, watching the yacht rock faintly in her slip like it had no idea what had just happened aboard. The elevator in the waterfront legal tower opened with a soft chime, spilling Pat Monroe into a hushed corridor of smoked glass doors and salt-polished floors. She adjusted the canvas strap of her bag. Inside, a folder thick with documents, and moved with a sailor's balance despite the nerves simmering just beneath her ribs. Suite 405, Ramirez, Linnell, Maritime and Estate Law. She stepped inside. No receptionist. Just a muted office hum and the smell of coffee and old wood. A door to the left was already ajar. "Mrs. Monroe," a calm voice called. "Come on in." Cole Ramirez stood from behind his desk, sleeves rolled, tie loose, reading glasses perched halfway down his nose. He was lean, sharp-featured, every move economical. A print of a merchant ship in high seas hung behind him, half lost in storm but still afloat. Pat offered her hand. "Appreciate you seeing me on short notice. For you, always." He gestured to the leather chair opposite. "Sit. Let's talk through this." Pat unzipped her bag and placed the folder on the desk, spine toward him. Then she met his eyes. "She pushed me, last night, On the boat. Would have gone overboard if I hadn't caught the rail. Cole didn't blink. Was Eric present? Right there. Heard the splash. Thinks it was just clumsy timing. And you? I know a deliberate push when I feel one. She slid the folder toward him. And I know it's not the first time. I logged 3 other incidents. Minor at the time. Not anymore. Cole opened the folder, scanning the estate documents. Still commingled accounts. Old trust version. Celine still has access to your medical directives. And the house. He tapped the binder's edge with a knuckle. We'll fix that. He leaned back, thinking aloud now. You'll need a living trust, one with strict conduct covenants. No contest clauses. Irrevocable on death, but revocable until then. Everything folds under it. Assets, accounts, property, yacht. Yacht included, Pat said firmly. She pushed you at sea, Pat. If we can prove recklessness aboard, you may have grounds for a maritime protection order. But we'll need to preserve every shred of evidence. Camera footage, both marina and onboard. Witness logs, repair invoices, anything that shows tampering. She cut a camera cable once, Pat said. Or someone did. Lionel's checking the system now. Cole's lips tightened. Then let's get ahead of this before she escalates. He turned to his monitor and began typing, quick, deliberate bursts. I'll draft the new trust structure and begin asset realignment. We'll lock access behind behavioral thresholds. And she won't inherit a dime unless she walks a razor-straight line. What about the Coast Guard? Pat asked quietly. If I file something? If the push happened while underway? And especially if she compromised vessel safety? Yes. It falls under reckless endangerment at sea. A report would trigger investigation. Not criminal yet, but it starts a record. That matters. Pat nodded, the old military instinct sparking in her bones. Documentation, chain of command, proof. Cole stopped typing. His voice dropped just slightly. Next time she tries, it won't be on open water. That's my job now. Pat met his gaze. For the first time in days, something steady rooted in her chest. Do it, she said. All of it. I want her boxed out before she even realizes it's happening. Cole smiled, just faintly. You hired the right sailor lawyer for that. He pulled a drawer open and slid over a pen. Let's get you out of danger first. Then we take back the rest. Pat took the pen. Her signature landed on the engagement form like the cut of an anchor line. The knock came at 6:47 p.m., soft, polite, and precisely timed between dinner and dusk. Pat already knew who it was. She moved calmly, pausing only to unlock her phone, swipe open the recording app, and lay it, face down, on the corner of the kitchen counter. The red light blinked silently. When she opened the door, Eric stood there holding a bakery box from La Petite Crème. Shoulders hunched like he was 12 again. Celine stood half a step behind him, too composed. A coral cashmere sweater draped over her shoulders like a stage prop. We thought we'd drop by, Eric said, his voice a few notches too cheerful. Brought your favorite, those little lemon tarts. They were out of the strawberry ones, Selena added smoothly. But these are fresher anyway. Hi, Pat. Pat stepped aside. Come in. She walked ahead of them, keeping her pace slow, controlled. If she was going to be cornered in her own home, she'd choose the arena. They settled around the kitchen island, the city skyline glowing behind them in the windows. Pat poured coffee from the still-warm carafe, black for herself, cream and sugar left untouched beside the mugs. Celine placed the dessert box in the center and opened it like an offering. So, Celine began, unwrapping a tart with careful fingers, we've been thinking a lot about your comfort lately. Long-term comfort. Pat raised an eyebrow. That's so. Well, Celine pulled a folded pamphlet from her tote. We toured this place last week, Seabreeze Living. It's a luxury facility, full marina view, chef-prepared meals, on-site nursing, no pressure. Of course. She slid the brochure across the counter, smiling, just enough teeth. Eric cleared his throat. It's just, we worry, you know? with the boat and the stairs and everything. And we thought maybe it's a good time to, revisit the estate stuff. Pat didn't look at the pamphlet. She took a sip of her coffee and smiled politely. You mean my will? Celine nodded. Butter wouldn't melt in her mouth. Exactly, nothing drastic. Just a little refresh. New names, maybe a health proxy update. Eric mentioned you still have me listed as your emergency contact for the yacht. Pat tilted her head, eyes flicking briefly to her son. He was sweating now, badly. A bead rolled from his temple, catching the edge of his collar. She remembered that look from when he crashed her car as a teenager and tried to lie about it. Eric swallowed. Maybe it's good to be official, paperwork-wise. Celine's always helping out. Pat refilled his coffee without asking. Of course, paperwork's important. I've actually been updating quite a bit lately. Celine's eyes sharpened for just a second, then softened again like whipped cream. Wonderful, she said. Just let us know if you need help navigating anything. Beneficiary forms, contact info, account access. We're happy to make it seamless. Pat stirred her cup, the spoon clinking gently. Seamless, that's the word. They lingered another 15 minutes. Celine complimented the interior lighting. Eric complimented the lemon tarts, though he hadn't touched his. Pat played hostess with perfect composure, refilling coffee, nodding at the right moments, asking no questions. When they finally stood to leave, Celine leaned in, brushing a hand along Pat's arm. Think about Seabreeze, okay? It's really lovely. You'd still have your independence, just with more peace of mind. Pat smiled, steady as ever. I'll give it some thought. The door clicked shut behind them. She waited exactly 8 seconds, then crossed to her phone and stopped the recording. A clear, uninterrupted audio log, every word captured, even the rustle of the brochure sliding across her counter. Pat attached the file to an email and typed the subject line. Monroe visit, audio Cole, timestamp, 1847 to 1916. You'll want to hear this. She hit send. Then she walked to the window and stared out at Seaproof, the dark silhouette still cradled in its slip. Donna Brooks didn't say anything at first, just tapped the space bar and leaned in toward the monitor. Pat sat beside her in the small marina security office, arms folded tightly over her chest. A paper cup of black coffee sat untouched at her elbow. The grainy footage played out in real time. No sound, just the soft clack of the ceiling fan overhead and the low buzz of fluorescent lights. On screen, the aft deck of Seaproof, golden light flaring across polished teak. Pat in the frame, focused on a fender line. Celine, 3 steps behind her, barefoot, wineglass in hand. Pat leaned forward, watching her own near-death moment with the steady focus of someone reviewing battle footage. Donna's brows pulled together as Celine's hand lifted, barely visible but unmistakably outstretched. Then the forward motion, Pat's body jolting toward the rail, a flail, a save. A glint of glass spiraling off the edge into the water. Dana exhaled through her nose. She didn't trip, she said flatly. That wasn't a stumble. She pushed you. I know, Donna hit pause. The moment froze with Celine mid-laugh, her expression frozen between delight and something too sharp. She ever done anything like this before? Dana asked, clicking open the incident log window. 3 minor ones before, all off camera. Pat's voice was cool even. But this one's different. This one gets a report. Dana nodded once and began typing. Incident report, Las Olas Marina date, August 14th. Time, 1832. Vessel, Seaproof. Type, unsafe behavior aboard, a possible assault. Summary, camera footage confirms reckless physical conduct by guest, Celine Monroe, leading to near overboard incident. She printed it, signed, and slid it across. Pat picked up the pen and signed with the same crisp certainty she'd once used on deployment logs and naval requisitions. Want me to notify local police? Dana asked. Not yet, Pat said. There's a protocol coming into play. By the time she reached Cole's office, he already had the report in hand. Perfect, he said, tapping the header. We'll file a safety complaint with the Coast Guard today. Maritime law doesn't take kindly to reckless conduct aboard a vessel underway. Pat nodded. And the marina? I'll handle it. You revoke permissions, and Dana will backstop it. From now on, no access unless you clear it. Back at her condo, Pat pulled out her weathered marina file and logged into the Los Olas admin portal. She updated the access code to Seaproof's dock slip, removed Celine's registered key fob from the approved list, and changed the vessel emergency contact from Eric to her attorney. Then, she pulled out the small carved box in her credenza and retrieved the brass spare keys, the ones Eric still had copies of. She dropped them into a drawer marked void and added a note for Cole. Confirm reissue of all yacht keys through Lionel. Lionel met her at Seaproof just after sundown, toolkit in hand. He moved with quiet purpose, his ball cap low over his eyes. She cut this one here, he said, holding up a spliced camera cable from beneath the flybridge. Snipped right at the mount. Clean job. Pat stared at it. Think she knew it was rolling? Doubt it. Just thought it might be. He held up the new install, twice the lens size, hidden better in the trim. This one, wired with redundancy, motion-triggered backups, hidden system in the nav console. If she so much as sneezes too close to that railing again. She won't, Pat said, her voice low. Lionel gave her a nod, then began sealing the panel. Pat climbed back aboard and walked the deck slowly, hand grazing the portside railing where it had all happened. She paused at the same spot she'd nearly gone over. This time, she leaned out just a little, testing its strength. Unshaken. The banker's voice on the line was polite, cautious. Yes, Ms. Monroe. The co-signed business credit line ending in 22441 has been closed per your instruction. Remaining balance paid in full from your primary account. Pat leaned against her condo window, phone pressed to her ear, eyes fixed on the Los Olas marina below. Seaproof glinted beneath the late morning sun, quiet and unreachable. Send a closure statement to my lawyer's office, she said. Hard copy. Yes, ma'am. Anything else? Pat ended the call without answering. Down at the docks, Celine's voice was unmistakable, louder than it needed to be. She stood at the edge of Slip B7 in wide sunglasses and a linen jumpsuit, trying to wave past Dana's marina staff, who were unmoved. I'm on the access list, she said, voice clipped, impatient. The younger dockhand shook his head. Not anymore. I was on it this morning. Then it must have changed this afternoon. Selena's jaw flexed as she pulled out her phone. She tapped the screen and held it to her ear, pacing now, trying not to look like she was pacing. Up in her condo, Pat ignored the call. She turned to her laptop instead, where an email from Cole was waiting. Subject: Trust finalized, full revocable structure complete. Eric inherits, only if compliant with behavioral terms. Selene is disqualified from any portion no contest clause. Enforceable violations trigger donation of all disputed assets to Gulf Coast Maritime Scholarship Fund. There was an attachment, a copy of the notarized trust document, filed and time-stamped. Pat opened her online banking next. One by one, she changed beneficiary designations. Her condo, her investment accounts, even her brokerage sweep. Now all listing the trust as sole recipient. No names. No assumptions. One more move. She initiated a cash transfer, 6 figures, into the trust-owned operating account Cole had set up the day before. She watched the cursor blink while the confirmation loaded, feeling something settle in her chest. Weight shifting, balance returning. Later that afternoon, Eric showed up alone. No Celine, just a wrinkled chambray shirt and desperation in his posture. Pat opened the door, but didn't invite him in. Just give me 5 minutes, he said, voice low. She's upset. She didn't mean for things to go so far. She just wants to talk. Pat leaned against the door frame. Her face gave nothing. Talk, she echoed. Eric nodded quickly. She thinks you misunderstood. She's really sorry, and I think if you just… I did talk to her, Pat interrupted. Voice calm. With my lawyer. Eric flinched. So you're really going through with all this? Cutting us off. I'm cutting off the danger, she said. He looked down at the welcome mat. I've always tried to keep the peace. Peace isn't the same thing as silence, Pat replied. And you've been silent too long. Eric looked like he might cry, but he didn't. Just nodded and turned to leave, a man finally realizing he was no longer standing on solid ground. That evening, Pat walked the dock with a calm steadiness that turned heads. She passed yacht owners she'd known for years, offering polite nods. Celine wasn't there. Dana had made sure of it. Anyone not on Pat's cleared list was now flagged as trespassing. At Seaproof's boarding gate, Dana met her with a nod and handed her a folded notice printed on marina letterhead. Updated restrictions, Dana said quietly. If she tries to set foot on this dock again, we'll call security. After that, Fort Lauderdale, PD. Pat accepted the paper, but her eyes were already on the horizon, thick clouds pulling in low and dark over the Atlantic. The courtroom in Broward County Family Division didn't smell like justice. It smelled like lemon disinfectant and old carpet. Fluorescent lighting washed the pale wood paneling into anonymity. The bailiff called the case number as Pat took her seat beside Cole, calm as glass. Across the aisle, Celine looked radiant in a navy wrap dress, makeup flawless, lips parted in just the right show of concern. Eric sat next to her, jaw tight, eyes sunken. He looked like he hadn't slept. The judge, a woman in her 60s with hair pulled back in a utilitarian knot, adjusted her glasses and scanned the docket. Petition for temporary guardianship filed by Mrs. Celine Monroe, citing unsafe behavior by respondent, Patricia Monroe, 70. Grounds include cognitive impairment, hallucination, and refusal of medical oversight. She looked up. Ms. Monroe, you have the floor. Celine stood and clasped her hands at her waist like a polished campaign wife. Your Honor, we love Pat. This isn't malicious. It's about safety. There was a recent incident aboard her yacht where she claimed I pushed her, which I absolutely did not. She's become increasingly paranoid, disoriented at sea, forgetful in conversations. We just want her to have the support she needs. Pat said nothing. Her gaze didn't leave Celine's face. Anything else? The judge asked. Celine tilted her head. She started making large financial moves, cutting family out, changing legal access, moving money into hidden trusts. We fear she's being manipulated, or declining faster than we thought. The judge nodded. Thank you. Counsel for Ms. Monroe. Cole stood, buttoned his suit jacket. Calm, crisp, lethal. Your Honor, we'll be submitting the following into evidence. He handed the clerk a binder. Exhibit A, an incident report filed by Dana Brooks, harbor master at Las Olas Marina, documenting reckless conduct aboard a vessel, along with time-stamped security footage. Exhibit B, testimony from Officer Marcus Reed, U.S. Coast Guard. The judge raised an eyebrow. The Coast Guard? Reed stepped forward, his uniform pressed razor-sharp. Yes, Your Honor. I've reviewed the footage and the incident report. The act in question, a shove near the stern rail of a moving vessel, constitutes reckless endangerment under boating safety protocols. Such behavior can result in serious injury or death. The subject who recovered from the incident showed no signs of imbalance or confusion, only quick reflex and stable posture. Celine stiffened in her seat. Cole continued. Exhibit C, testimony from Lionel Pierce, yacht surveyor and system technician. Lionel approached, clipboard in hand. The vessel's security system showed evidence of tampering. Specifically, a camera wire was cut cleanly 2 weeks prior to the incident. The damaged segment was located near the same deck where the subject claims she was pushed. The newly installed system now has redundancy. Cole paused for a beat, then delivered the dagger. Your Honor, this is not a case of confusion. This is a deliberate attempt to seize control of an estate by painting a competent woman as unstable. Ms. Monroe isn't declining. She's defending herself. The judge leaned back, steepling her fingers. Mrs. Monroe, she said, turning to Pat. Would you like to speak? Pat stood slowly, her navy blazer neat, her eyes like polished stone. I've captained a vessel for 30 years, Your Honor. If I had lost my balance, I'd have gone in. I didn't. Because I knew what was happening. I wasn't confused. I was targeted. The courtroom was silent but for the hum of the outside. The judge exhaled and spoke clearly, decisively. Petition for emergency guardianship is denied. I will, however, order a standard psychological competency review. Unbiased and court-assigned. If Ms. Monroe is of sound mind, this matter will be closed. She turned to Celine. Further petitions without substantial evidence may be considered harassment. Is that clear? Celine's jaw flexed. Crystal. Pat sat down without a word. As the room emptied, Eric hesitated near the aisle. He looked at his mother, the courtroom, and then at Celine, who walked out ahead of him without looking back. He followed, but not quickly. Yacht gossip was like diesel fumes. It clung to everything and lingered long after the source had vanished. 2 mornings after court, Celine appeared at the Las Olas Marina Cafe in oversized sunglasses and a tennis skirt she didn't play tennis in. She moved from slip to slip, striking up conversations with practiced warmth. She's not well, she said to a retired couple docked beside Seaproof. Pat nearly fell overboard last month, twice. Eric's been so worried. We tried to get her help, but she thinks we're after her money. Can you imagine? She stirred her iced matcha with deliberate grace. It's just sad. She was always so sharp. At another table, she leaned in with sympathetic eyebrows. The court wouldn't intervene unless she was really deteriorating, right? But the judge kicked it back to psych review. Probably didn't want the drama on the docket. By afternoon, whispers curled through the marina like cigarette smoke. Pat Monroe lost a step. She's lashing out. Poor Eric trying to manage all this behind the scenes. Pat heard none of it firsthand. But Ivy Murray did. Luxury charges logged under marine consulting, Ivy's voice came through on speaker as Pat stood in her condo kitchen, sipping coffee from her Coast Guard mug. Define luxury, Pat said. Ivy's keyboard clicked. 4 Seasons Miami, Cartier Boutique in Bal Harbor, 3 separate spa charges under Eric's business account, all under a consultancy billing code. Guess who was tagged on the merchant receipts? Pat's lips thinned. Celine. Bingo, I've got copies. Want me to loop Cole? Loop him. She ended the call, then picked up a clean manila folder and began sliding the printed summaries inside. 2 days later, the Yacht Club lounge hummed with quiet conversation and clinking silverware as Pat entered wearing white slacks, a navy polo, and the same steel composure she'd worn in court. She took a window table alone, ordered 1 black coffee, and opened the folder in plain sight. No speeches, no posturing, just paper. Dana arrived first, sitting beside her with a nod and a half-smile. Lionel came next, sliding into the booth across from her without a word. No one raised their voices. Pat laid out the Marina incident report, the bank summaries, and the page from the finalized trust. She didn't narrate, just turned pages slowly, letting numbers and signatures speak for themselves. At the neighboring table, 2 boat owners glanced over. Another came in minutes later and veered toward Pat's booth with a cautious smile. Heard you had a rough hearing, Pat looked up. No worse than a squall you can see coming. Dana snorted into her coffee. By mid-morning, Celine's version of events had started to fray. People who'd known Pat for decades, who'd seen her dock in high wind and tie off blindfolded during drills, began questioning the new narrative. A captain doesn't forget how to sail overnight, especially not one with receipts. Later that week, Cole called Celine's attorney. You've got 36 hours to walk back those insinuations, he said, his tone cool but electric. or we enforce every defamation and harassment clause in the trust, retroactively. That includes the press, the court, and the docks. I'll speak to my client, the lawyer muttered. I suggest you do. Thoroughly. He hung up without waiting for pleasantries. That night, Celine stood alone near the end of the dock, watching the rippling silhouette of Seaproof. She was still, too still. No sunglasses this time, no performance, just calculation. She reached for her phone, fingers hovering over the screen. But this time, she didn't dial. Behind her, the sound of approaching footsteps, measured, heavy marine boots on dockwood. The courtroom was quieter this time, not somber, just different. The air didn't crackle with accusations or spin on Celine's theatrics. It was a hearing, procedural, but charged in its own quiet way. Pat sat calmly in a steel-backed chair beside Cole, a slim folder in her lap. Across from them, Celine looked less composed than before. Her mouth held the shape of a smirk, but her fingers tapped relentlessly against her phone. Eric sat beside her again, only this time he looked smaller, hunched in his jacket like he wanted to vanish into the seams. The judge glanced over the file in front of her. Were reconvened regarding the asset freeze on accounts connected to the Monroe Trust and associated LLCs. Counsel, proceed. Cole stood, crisp and unhurried. Your Honor, we are submitting sworn affidavits and correspondence, dated 2 months prior to the Marina incident, showing my client's long-standing intention to restructure her estate. These were drafted in anticipation of market shifts and her own legal housekeeping. Not in retaliation, not under distress, just prudence. He handed the documents to the clerk. Additionally, he continued, nodding toward the gallery, we'll be submitting forensic ledgers compiled by Ivy Murray, CPA, showing that Celine Monroe, acting under no professional license, siphoned thousands in personal luxury expenses through Eric Monroe's Marine Consultancy, LLC. These transactions were concealed under the billing code Marine Vendor Outreach and occurred monthly for over a year. A soft rustle ran through the courtroom. The judge flipped through the pages. Lodged at the Four Seasons under the company account. Tiffany receipt. Spa services billed as travel stipends. She glanced up. All while petitioning for emergency guardianship and claiming financial mismanagement by Ms. Monroe. Cole's mouth quirked. Indeed, the judge leaned back in her chair. Asset freeze is lifted. I see no evidence of financial incompetence on Ms. Monroe's part. On the contrary, she seems to have been a step ahead. Celine blinked rapidly. The judge wasn't done. Furthermore, I find that the petitioners may have filed in bad faith. You will not file another action of this nature without direct court approval. Do you understand, Mrs. Monroe? Celine's voice was paper thin. Yes, Your Honor. I would also remind counsel, the judge added sharply, that abusing the court system for leverage in private estate matters is sanctionable conduct. The gavel didn't fall, but the tone might as well have. In the courthouse hallway, the doors clicked shut behind them with an audible finality. Cole tucked his papers under one arm and gave Pat a slight nod. Ready for the counter motion, he asked. She nodded once. Make it clean. He peeled off down the corridor, already dialing. Across the hall, Celine stood by the water fountain, shaking with rage she could no longer disguise. When she spotted Pat exiting, she strode forward, voice low and venomous. You smug old bitch. You think this is over? Pat didn't flinch. I think you just made your last mistake in heels. Before Celine could reply, a Marina staffer in khakis stepped out from the bench alcove near the elevators, clipboard in hand, neutral expression betraying nothing. Ms. Monroe, he said, pen hovering. That'll go in the log. Harassment in a public government building. We file copies monthly with the Marina office. Celine turned slowly, face flushing as she realized she'd been watched, and documented, again. Eric hovered awkwardly near the vending machines, staring at the floor. Pat walked past him without a word, but something about her silence stopped him cold. I didn't know, he said to the floor. About the money, about what she did. Pat paused at the exit. You didn't look, she said. That's worse. He didn't follow her out. Outside, Cole met her on the courthouse steps. The motion's in, he said. We're requesting full recovery of legal fees. And I added a protective order, expanding no contact to include the entire marina, not just the vessel. He passed her a manila envelope. Also, something else you'll want to review. Ivy found a connection between Celine's name and a shell vendor registered to a Miami P.O. box. It's got teeth. Pat opened the flap and peered inside, then smiled, just a little. It appeared on page A9 of the Sun Sentinel, tucked between a community zoning dispute and a column about hurricane insurance scams. Marina money games, the murky waters of family yachts and inheritance. The article didn't name anyone directly, but for those who lived dockside, those who drank coffee at the Las Olas Marina Cafe, who tied off at slip B7, who knew the difference between port and starboard. It might as well have been a confession. A mid-sized marine consultancy linked to several personal luxury charges through layered LLC structures. An elder beneficiary recently targeted in an unsuccessful guardianship petition, despite multiple indicators of legal competence. Anonymous sources report escalating tension between family members involving property rights to a classic motor yacht and adjacent waterfront assets. The story ran 3 columns deep, dotted with phrases like, according to forensic accounting records, and publicly filed trust documents. Ivy had done her job with surgical precision, redacting names, cleaning identifiers, but leaving just enough breadcrumb trail for the marina to follow, and follow they did. At the yacht club that afternoon, no one greeted Celine. She arrived in heels too high for the deck planks, dressed like she thought she could outglam a scandal. But the smiles that once met her, tight-lipped but polite, were gone. Conversations paused when she approached, heads tilted away instead of toward. She made it 3 feet past the lounge door before Dana appeared. Need to see your credentials, Dana said flatly. Celine blinked. I've been coming here for months. Not anymore. Dana held up a laminated sheet. Guest privileges denied. Marina protocol. Not without the owner's written permission, and I don't think we'll be getting that today. Celine's throat tightened, but she said nothing, just turned slowly and walked back out into the sun, heels clicking like an exit cue. Cole sat across from Pat in his office that same afternoon, the windows open to let in a warm Atlantic breeze. He slid a document across the table, formal motion to validate the trust and will under Florida's no contest statute. She challenges it now, she forfeits everything, instantly, he said. And per clause 9b, so does Eric, if he supports the claim. Pat didn't smile, didn't gloat. She simply initialed each page and signed the bottom like she was confirming a ship's log. File it, she said. Cole nodded. Already in the pipeline. Pat didn't speak to the press, not once. She declined an interview request with a simple reply from Cole's office. Ms. Monroe has no comment at this time. Her focus remains on her safety and maritime affairs. Instead, she let the filings speak. She let the paper trail stretch like a wake behind her, unbroken and official. And slowly, without yelling, without fighting, Celine's story lost oxygen. By week's end, Eric got his first call, then another, then 3 in one day. Hey, Eric, we're just going over last quarter's filings and noticed something off in the vendor list. Who signed off on those reimbursements for Miami? Was that you, or are you still working with your wife on the marine PR side of the business? Because we're seeing some overlap. He tried to answer, but there was no script, no recovery. Every question was a thread. And the more he pulled, the faster the seams gave out. He texted Pat once, "Can we talk?" No reply. Then again, "You were right. I didn't see it. I do now. Please." She read it. She didn't answer. Back at the marina, Pat walked the dock alone at dusk, her steps light on the weathered wood. No audience, no need for one. Dana passed her near slip B4 and handed her an envelope, stamped and folded. Official, Dana said. That counter motion, filed and confirmed. No contact zone extended to entire marina perimeter. She steps foot here again. It's not just a warning, it's a citation. Pat took the envelope, tucked it beneath her arm, and looked out toward the water. The sky was softening. So were the winds. But war had taught her storms didn't end. They moved. And sometimes they circled back. The smell hit Lionel before he even dropped his tool bag on Seaproof's deck. Not oil, not diesel. Something fouler, chemical, sour, metallic. He crouched near the stern, unscrewing the fuel access panel beneath the deck cushion. What he saw made his gut coil. The main fuel line had been slit, just enough to leak under pressure. Not enough to stop the engine outright, but enough to spark disaster at cruising speed. He snapped 3 photos. One of the incision, one of the pooling slick beneath the line, one of the faint smear of fingerprints. Gloved, maybe, but careless. He texted Cole, "Need you." Vessel tampered. Photos coming. Not accidental. Then he called Dana. Officer Marcus Reed boarded the boat just before noon. His uniform, as always, looked like it had been pressed with a ruler. He moved silently down the walkway, eyes sharp beneath his mirrored lenses. Dana met him at the dock. "You'll want to see it for yourself." Inside Seaproof's engine bay, Reed leaned into the shadows. Lionel stood nearby, hands behind his back like he was back in Navy drill inspection. Reed clicked his pen light on. "Fuel lines sliced. Intentional?" "No question," Lionel said. "Angles too precise, and there's no way it happens from vibration. Someone wanted a failure. Controlled. Delayed." Reed scribbled notes. Dana folded her arms. Had this boat gone out yesterday, that line would have ruptured fully 20 minutes into open water. No mayday, no prep, no time to brace. Reed stood slowly. Sabotage. Reckless endangerment at sea. She's lucky it was found, he filed the inspection report on site. An hour later, Dana gathered her marina staff. Until further notice, nobody comes near Seaproof without Pat's written approval. I don't care if they're blood, married in, or Jesus with a boarding pass. If their name's not in the log, they don't step foot on this dock. A few of the younger dock hands exchanged wide-eyed glances. Dana held their gaze. This isn't gossip anymore, it's criminal. Cole added the inspection report and Lionel's photos to a new motion, this one heavier than the rest. Request for permanent protective order, sabotage and reckless endangerment filing. Evidence of mechanical sabotage to the vessel Seaproof. Plaintiff is at risk of further tampering or physical harm. The nature of the damage suggests intentional timing, coinciding with recent legal setbacks. Petitioner seeks permanent restriction of respondent from all marina properties, vessels, docks, and affiliated holdings. He dropped it on the court clerk's desk the next morning with a clipped, "Time sensitive." Pat said nothing when she read the report. She didn't react when she saw the incision photo, but when she reached the part about rupture under pressure, she paused, set her mug down, and stared out her window. Celine wasn't trying to scare her anymore. She was trying to break her, and she had failed. Again. That afternoon, Pat handed Dana a signed authorization to relocate Seaproof. "I want her moved to slip D14, triple gated, cameras everywhere, and change the slip code, no digital fob, manual lock." Dana nodded. "You sure you want her that exposed to the walkway?" "I'm not hiding anymore," Pat said. "Let her walk by. Let her know she lost." Meanwhile, Ivy's audit had cracked another seam. She stood in Cole's office, thumbing through a new report. "See this shell vendor? Seaglow Supply? Registered out of a Miami P.O. box. No website, no phone. But it links back to a personal email. Belongs to Brinley Hastings." Cole looked up. "That's Celine's yoga friend?" "Yep. The one who suddenly started consulting for Eric's LLC the month after Celine was removed from marina privileges. Paid $10,000 for media relations last quarter. And the timing?" Ivy smiled. 2 days before the fuel tampering. Cole nodded once. "We'll need sworn statements. And a subpoena. Ivy tapped the folder. Already prepped. Just say the word. At sunset, Pat walked Seaproof one final time in her old slip. Lionel had replaced the line, rechecked the cameras, run diagnostics on the engine. It was safe again. But Pat didn't touch the helm. Not yet. She stood on deck and watched the sun dissolve into the horizon. The same sea that nearly took her now reflected fire and calm. She wasn't just surviving anymore, she was preparing. The courtroom smelled of polished wood, lemon disinfectant, and tension. Patrons shifted in their seats, quiet as the gavel tapped 3 times. The hearing was set to resolve the latest escalation: sabotage, reckless endangerment, and financial misconduct. Pat sat beside Cole, the leather of her chair cold beneath her palms, spine straight, eyes steady. Across the aisle, Celine fidgeted in her chair, lawyer murmuring urgently in her ear. Eric hovered in the back, jaw tight, guilt pooling in his eyes. "Counsel for the plaintiff?" the judge asked. Her tone clipped. Cole rose, crisp, commanding. "Your Honor, we are presenting full evidence of deliberate misconduct against Ms. Monroe, including physical endangerment aboard her vessel, financial malfeasance within the family's LLCs, and tampering with property to obstruct access and safety." He gestured to the screen behind him. First, the incident video. The monitor flickered to life. The familiar golden glow of Seaproof's deck played out again. Celine approaching from aft, hand reaching. Pat catching herself just in time as a glass skittered across the deck. Gasps whispered through the room. Celine's face, frozen mid-laugh, made the air in the gallery thicken. Dana Brooks, seated nearby, passed notes to Cole, confirming timestamps. Cole clicked forward. The frame showing Lionel's fuel line incision, documented with photographs and precise timing. "Exhibit B," he said, handing a tablet to the court clerk. Yacht surveyor Lionel Pierce documented deliberate sabotage, including the angle of cut and potential for catastrophic engine failure. This was no accident. Lionel stepped forward, voice calm and authoritative. "Your Honor, I measured the incision and compared it with diagnostic readings. A failure under pressure would have occurred within 20 minutes of departure. The placement and method indicate intentional tampering, timed to coincide with Ms. Monroe's absence from surveillance." Officer Marcus Reed followed, crisp and disciplined in his uniform. "Your Honor, I inspected the vessel, verified tampering, and confirmed reckless endangerment under maritime safety regulations. There was clear risk to life and property." Celine's lawyer leaned forward, jaw tightening. "Your Honor, these may be misunderstandings, miscommunications in accounting, or procedural discrepancies." Cole held up his hand, stopping him. "We have ledger records, sworn testimony, and forensic tracing, dates, merchant receipts, and banking logs. All match expenditures diverted to Ms. Monroe's spouse's LLC, but clearly benefiting Celine personally." Ivy stepped forward next, a crisp stack of binders in hand. "Your Honor, every purchase aligns with Celine's known lifestyle: travel, luxury, retail, spa services. These are consistent, repeated patterns over 12 months, fully traceable through corporate billing." No ambiguity. The judge exhaled slowly, fingers steepled. She shook her head at Celine's lawyer. "Misunderstandings. There is a deliberate pattern, clear, documented, and corroborated by multiple independent sources." Celine's face paled. The smirk from previous hearings was gone. Cole's voice was measured, controlled. "We move for a permanent restraining order against Celine Monroe, barring all contact with Ms. Monroe, her property, and her marina holdings. We also request authorization to recover legal fees incurred from defending against these malicious actions." The judge nodded. She tapped her gavel. Permanent restraining order granted. Motion for legal fees approved. Furthermore, the sabotage incident will be referred to Broward County authorities for potential criminal investigation. Court is adjourned pending further proceedings. The room seemed to exhale collectively. Celine sagged in her chair, lips pressed thin. Eric's face crumpled, shame pooling into disbelief. He approached his mother cautiously, voice almost a whisper. "Mom, I didn't see it. I looked away too long. I should have stopped her." Pat's eyes softened slightly. Just enough. She placed a hand on his arm. "It's not about blame, Eric. It's about seeing clearly now. And acting." Eric nodded, silent tears tracing lines down his cheeks. He glanced at Celine as she stormed from the courtroom, escorted by her lawyer, face twisted in fury. Pat stood, her posture rigid but calm. Cole fell into step beside her. Outside, the sun hit the courthouse plaza, reflecting off nearby glass in sharp shards of light. She inhaled slowly. The breeze carried the faint tang of salt from the nearby intracoastal. Every step she had taken, from the shove on deck to the logbook to the trust to this courtroom, had led here. And yet she knew the sea did not forgive, nor did it rest. The horizon remained wide, unpredictable, and dangerous. Pat adjusted her blazer and straightened her back. She had won this battle, but the war, she realized, was far from over. The courthouse smelled of polished mahogany and ink, but this time the air carried a different weight. Finality. Cole leaned across the polished oak desk, his fingers lightly drumming a rhythm that matched the quiet heartbeat of certainty. "Your Honor," he said, voice steady, measured, lethal in its precision. "We move to dismiss the distress claim filed by Celine Monroe. The evidence, as we've previously presented, demonstrates retaliatory litigation intended to harass and intimidate the respondent. We further request a Rule 57 declaratory judgment, affirming the validity of the trust, its no contest clauses, and all protective covenants therein." Pat sat beside him, navy blazer sharp, hands folded neatly. Her eyes didn't flick to Celine, who sat across the aisle, simmering in frustration that could no longer be hidden behind polished makeup and forced calm. The judge scanned the motion, lips compressed. She tapped her gavel lightly. "Motion granted. Celine Monroe's claim is dismissed with prejudice. Court orders sanctions as specified under Florida Statute 57-105. Legal fees to be reimbursed to the defendant. Further, any future filings without prior court approval will result in additional penalties." Selena's lips pressed into a thin line. She flinched at the words, but there was no recourse. Every option she'd counted on, the courts, the perceived sympathy, the manipulations, had been foreclosed. Cole turned to his phone. A flurry of messages appeared. Ivy's updates, the final reports from Lionel, even Donna's confirmation of marina restrictions. Each piece of evidence and procedural action had fallen into place, like cogs in a well-oiled engine. "Eric's accountant has completed the final audit," Ivy said, stepping into the office. Hair tucked behind her ears, clipboard in hand. "All discrepancies flagged. We're clearing the LLC books. Celine's access terminated. Any transactions she initiated personally are reversed or formally voided. She's exposed." Eric, still looking shell-shocked, rubbed the back of his neck. I can't believe how far it went. I didn't see." "Look carefully next time," Pat said, calm, flinty, and precise. Her gaze softened briefly, but didn't waver. "You don't get to look away when someone's pulling the strings." Ivy handed Eric the reconciled statements. "Everything's accounted for, trustworthy. And the LLC is now fully compliant under your mother's oversight." Meanwhile, Cole prepared the final filings for the trust amendments. Pat's hand followed each motion, initialing amendments to the revocable trust. The changes were deliberate. Eric's inheritance was placed in a spendthrift subtrust, ensuring control remained with Pat. Celine was permanently excluded, zero access to assets or influence. Conduct clauses, no contest rules, and charitable trigger clauses were reinforced. Every sentence, every signature, carried the weight of irrevocable certainty. Donna's staff posted a notice at the marina. "Any harassment, physical or verbal, will be treated as trespass, zero tolerance, No exceptions. The sign gleamed under the late afternoon sun. Everyone knew the rules and the consequences for breaking them. Cole finalized the court filings, all documents notarized, recorded, and entered into secure legal repositories. Each stamp, each seal, each date carefully synchronized with Ivy's financial records and Lionel's maritime logs. The orchestration left no gaps, no ambiguities, no loopholes. Pat leaned back in her office chair, the setting sun casting golden light across her desk, reflecting off the polished teak of her yacht photographs, mounted on the walls. Outside, Sea-Proof rocked gently in its slip, secure, the new codes in place, the triple gate locks engaged. She exhaled slowly, letting the tension release. Every legal battle, every financial safeguard, every marina restriction had converged here. But she didn't relax completely. The sea, like life, demanded constant attention. She had won decisively, but she knew vigilance was not optional. Cole tapped her shoulder lightly. "Everything's in order. You've sealed it. She can't touch a thing." Pat nodded, voice calm but resolute. "Then it's done, for now." She glanced at the window, at the water glinting beneath the fading sky, and thought of every shove, every misstep, every calculated maneuver Celine had attempted. The tide had turned. Every wave now carried her authority, her foresight, her control. And yet, Pat's eyes lingered on the horizon, sharp, alert. Because the final strike wasn't just about legal filings or trustee documents. It was about setting the terms for the next voyage. And no one would be steering Sea-Proof but her. The intracoastal gleamed under early morning sunlight, glassy and smooth as poured mercury. Sea-Proof cut through the water like a knife, twin engines humming in even, contented rhythm. Pat sat at the helm, sunglasses reflecting the pale sky, the wind teasing wisps of the silver hair around her face. The solitude was complete. No phone calls, no texts, no intrusions. Just salt, varnished teak, and the hum of a vessel in its element. She guided the yacht through the narrow channels, tracing familiar landmarks, the green buoy at the bend, the mangroves on the west bank, the faint outline of the city skyline shimmering in the distance. The rhythm of throttle adjustments, the soft slap of water against hull, had always steadied her nerves. Today, it steadied more than nerves. It steadied the mind, the body, the soul. 2 hours later, she returned to her slip, Sea-Proof bobbing lightly against the fenders. As she stepped onto the dock, a stack of letters awaited her, neatly arranged on a wooden crate near the pilings. She picked up the top envelope, saw the familiar handwriting of a local boater, and smiled faintly. One after another, letters from other yacht owners and marina patrons expressed gratitude for her unwavering stand against bullying, intimidation, and entitlement. She set them carefully aside, a quiet acknowledgement that the battle had rippled far beyond her own deck. Dana appeared moments later, holding a steaming mug of coffee. She handed one to Pat, perching lightly on the dock's edge. "Morning," Dana said, voice low but warm. "Figured you might appreciate company before the office opens." Pat accepted the mug, inhaled deeply, and let the rich aroma fill the space between them. They watched the morning light scatter across the water, traffic of small boats leaving gentle wakes. From the far end of the marina, Officer Marcus Reed's cutter bobbed in its slip. He tipped his hat, a small nod, steady as always. "Everything squared away," he called across the dock. Pat gave a small smile. "So far, yes." Lionel arrived shortly after, toolbox tucked under one arm. He handed her a slim report. The pages crisp and official. "Maintenance complete. All systems green. No anomalies. Fuel lines, engines, navigation, clean as a whistle." Pat's fingers traced the list. She felt the satisfaction of precision and preparation, the reassurance of readiness. Back in her condo, her laptop pinged with Ivy's final report. Pat opened the email, scanning lines quickly. Sanctions collected, financial transfers executed, Trust in estate safeguards active. No vulnerabilities left unguarded. The cadence of completed work, the clean sweep of closure, brought a rare lightness to her chest. The ding of her phone interrupted the quiet. Eric's name appeared. She answered without hesitation. Pat. Mom, can we meet? His voice was tentative, careful. I want to talk. About everything. I want to understand and I want to make things right. Pat paused. She let the breeze carry the words to the water, thought of the lessons learned, the boundaries firmly set, the steps that could no longer be undone. We can meet, she said, calm and measured. But we'll do it my way, boundaries clear. Celine isn't part of this conversation, ever again. I understand, Eric said, relief threading through his voice. Pat set the phone down and leaned against the railing. Sea-proof shimmered in the morning sun. Engines quiet now, deck clean and ready. The marina was calm, the waters steady, and for the first time in months, she felt the pulse of control, not domination, not fear, just mastery over her domain. Dana sipped her coffee. You've earned this, she said softly. Pat's gaze swept across the marina, noting the secure slips, the triple gate locks, the posted notices. She nodded slowly. Yes, but the sea doesn't forgive and doesn't forget. Peace isn't passive. It's active, constant. I'll respect it, but I won't be caught off guard again. The morning breeze tugged at the edges of her shirt. The sun reflected off the water in molten shards of light. Sea-proof rested against the fenders like a sentinel. Pat felt the quiet resolve in her bones, the satisfaction of preparation married to vigilance. And as she exhaled, letting the warm light spill across her shoulders, she knew it. The peace she had kept was hard-won, deliberate, and absolute, for now. The office was quiet except for the soft hum of the air conditioning and the faint click of the shredder. Pat picked up the envelope resting on her desk. Celine's letter, thick with self-pity, veiled threats, and empty charm. She set it into the shredder. The motor whirred. Paper disappeared, bit by bit, until nothing remained. A small, almost imperceptible smile touched her lips. She reached for her estate binder, the leather worn from years of careful handling. Inside were layers of meticulously organized documents, court orders, trust amendments, marina filings, bank reconciliations. She slid in the final stamped court order, the seal glinting under the afternoon light. Each sheet lay perfectly aligned, a map of victories earned and safeguards established. She ran her fingers along the spine and closed it with quiet finality, the snap echoing softly like a gavel. Eric appeared in the doorway. Hesitation etched into every line of his face. Mom, I want to say I'm sorry. I didn't see what she was doing. I let it go too long. His voice trembled, barely above a whisper. Pat looked at him, her eyes steady but soft. Eric, I understand, but this isn't just about apologies. It's about boundaries. We can have contact, yes, but it's conditional. Celine isn't part of it, never again. He nodded, relief threading through his posture. I understand, I just want to make things right between us. Pat let a slow breath escape. Then we'll start there, carefully, step by step. The sun was dipping low when she made her way onto the deck. The water caught the dying light, shimmering like molten gold across the intracoastal. Sea-proof rocked gently in her slip, engines silent, rigging swaying softly in the evening breeze. She leaned against the polished teak railing, fingers tracing the smooth surface, and opened her logbook one last time. Sea-proof, secure, she wrote, precise and deliberate. The words carried more weight than any signature, a final entry that marked the culmination of vigilance, strategy, and survival. She uncorked a bottle of ginger ale, the bubbles fizzing like tiny reminders of triumph. She poured it into a crystal tumbler, lifted it to the horizon, and let the last rays of sunlight play across the water. The toast was private, solemn, a quiet recognition of miles sailed, battles fought, and lessons learned. Her phone buzzed, breaking the silence. 3 messages lit the screen. Cole, all done. Ivy, she's out. Dana, slip reserved. Pat read each in turn, letting the reassurance sink in. Every ally, every safeguard, every plan had solidified. Every potential threat neutralized or contained. The intracoastal stretched before her, calm but layered with hidden currents. Reminders that vigilance was never optional. She took a sip of ginger ale, letting the sweetness mingle with the salty air. Each bubble seemed to carry away the residue of fear, doubt, and confrontation, leaving clarity in its place. She closed her log, tucked her pen neatly into its holder, and let her gaze drift to the horizon. Quiet miles awaited, miles she would navigate alone if needed, with confidence in her judgment and certainty in her preparations. And in that calm, settled space, she understood the lesson fully. Strength was not merely in reacting, but in anticipating, in holding fast to principles, in letting the world see only what you chose to reveal, and nothing more. She glanced at the water again, at the golden glint on the wake behind Seaproof, and whispered to herself almost ceremonially, "At the yacht, my daughter-in-law tried to push me into the water to take my inheritance, so I took her future instead." The final line was more than a statement. It was a declaration, a shield, a seal, and for now, it was enough. Pat set the glass down, turned back to the cabin, and let the evening settle around her like a soft, protective shroud. The battle had ended, but the lesson remained, unyielding, precise, and entirely hers.